So I think my strength is understanding really clear narratives. The clearest narratives are stuff in the Bible and fairy tales that everyone knows of. Such as in the Bible, it's like the land of milk and honey. And then I like to couple that with the grass is greener on the other side. Knowing these two things in chemistry is an incredible attribute if you can thoroughly explain the expression of the intricacies. And this is what I'm best at, but verbally it's a crapshoot, because half the time I haven't studied enough, and then the other half of the time no one even cares. And by no one even cares, I mean that I've never seen anyone on the internet walking the street side trying to explain hardcore academia. Can be looked at as a zombie apocalypse if a war popped off. Whenever there's like a giant civil misconstrue, and then everyone's running around with like chickens and their heads cut off, the stocks drop because everyone gets exposed for what bad stuff they did on the streets at their job. And so then the guys who sat back, the boards and the stakeholders, the stakeholders are able to buy up the stocks that are bad and just start up from ground zero with all that extra. And then a lot of the times I just get lost in tangents because I want to explain for the undercompensation of the hierarchy. And so when you can never tell the difference if you're looking at it from the outside point of view, because there is no difference between a spiral expanding outwards for infinity and then a circle. If you're looking from it and then the outside, it'll look infinitely smooth either way. But then on the insider's point of view, you're able to see as clear as day if you look at the middle. And so that's what the focal cannot ever be fully grasped when you're going out on tangents, because you're just explaining the outside of the spiral versus the outside of a circle, given that the spiral tangent is you going off into infinity. It just doesn't ever decipher a difference. It just doesn't. But more so it would be best seen if you're combining these anatomy structures from like the atomic structure, where it shows like a bird's eye view of like three different parts of the body being collapsed into one. It's almost like this filtration system that they're using to show fanciful ways of making tea. And this is what a new way of showing homeostasis is and coagulation. So government offices and their closures, how much effect is that is a joke, where during a lockdown, half of them were done, and then the only thing you could see is all the garbage piling up at parks and garbage cans about. So that's all that they mean, is just a few garbage cans overflowing. It should be like clear as day how many more things that are obstructed if half of them are put out inside of the government shutting down during the lockdown. Having all of these layers and having someone underprepared to explain something highly complex like a doctor's procedure is one way that you can make an entire world collapse, especially if the phone consultants are robots half the time, in order to get to a real consultant who then is unable to communicate properly. You can find out the best way to handle a case without having all these bells and whistles. Then you won't have to have all these bells and whistles to get paid for in a statement, and then just have the thing at the head. So in medical, you're going to have these lab works, and then there's therapies before you go in for lab work. And if these are just routine and then they rack up these bills, that can be a thing that's used from a larger scape where it didn't matter, but they're just doing it because it matters, because that's the best they have. And so what's something cruel and unusual versus something that is trying to get handled from the top down with all these litigations and itemizations? A litigation can be something more that you can handle, or you just get thrown up against the rings, and then you can't say how many bad judges there are, because if there's judges who fancy things that are illegal, now they're going to subside with something that's detrimental to someone opposing their greatest indentures, their greatest feats for having them. And then within a kangaroo court as well is something where it's a counterpart of not being able to have any real meaning. So these are all established through bending over to satisfy, or else they would have been thrown out and hung to dry. It's infinitely important not to take things lightly. If it's just a few garbage cans overflowing, what the heck's the big deal, Frank? The big deal is the shapes of reality are handled in nuclear reactions, and all of this is within just the change of some energy. If the energy is being changed, you can have multitudes of different outcomes to fit any narrative. And what this looks like in Einstein's equation is just making the difference of m be of a difference. Anytime energy stops and starts, that's a rest position, and it's able to get double jumped. And how that double jump occurs on cosmic scales can just have one point where it makes for an entire different narrative to change. And so when you have Vice President Harris going on TV saying that we might have to cut the energy to fight in a war, and what that might mean is a change of energy, and that could have a giant outcome where it could put you outside of a spiral versus being inside of a circle and not knowing there's any difference because of an infinity. So here we are downwind from that siren, where it's propagated through the Doppler shifting just a smidge bit. It's with this that catastrophic events can be deterred or enhanced through cosmic scales, simply through how energy moves. What we're listening is an example of kinematic, but what we're talking about is cosmic. That's a cosmic ray proportionality spectrum. And so it's really important to understand what a state of emergence is, because that allows restrictions to get thrown up, and then it's as if you can utilize an entire electric grid and say it's because you don't want to get cyber attacked. That's the position that we're in, because no one knows the difference between individuals' health versus a state of emergence of an entire country. Those are massive scales of differences, and it's convoluted because in court you can never say how much pain someone has. And so this is what we're dealing with. And if you know how to quantify the things between the two, you're not even allowed to say how, because you get censored on the internet by corporations, fact checkers. That's just like saying, what's the difference between a lot of stock and livestock? Well, there's really no difference if they're both poison and corrupt, because then you're just going to get food poisoning or end up with being at the bottom of the barrel. He's like, it shouldn't be digital. Counting processes that shouldn't be digital but could be numeric. What does that even mean? Well, if your account gets frozen or there's a blackout in the entire nation, those are two in the same thing. You're SOL in either case. So in order to properly articulate what that could seem and how to get the off switch back on, you would need antenna work. And what better antennas could be utilized than streets, into deviations in sidewalks and county lines, state, all this stuff. This is what the police are going off of, and you get even charged tickets higher if you're on an intersection inside of a different county. A pipeline shut off. When pipelines are shut off, oil and gas goes up, and that inflates everything else because we're all circulating around vehicles and then computers. And so the more that you have to drive your vehicle to the store, those prices will get pushed up as well. So it's like the ugly duckling of the economy. And what else more is there to say when if you could control the lay of the land just by reading it better, down to the science of you've got each road, each street, each state line, and then the entire escaping of what a seashore to shining sea is. And the more that can be broken down and quantified, you can give a value to something other than what your life being at stake could be to a shareholder on a board. Where electronic grids are mandating drinking water going bad or food spoiling because refrigeration's out, we depend on not getting attacked cybernetically immensely, up until the point of cosmic scales of catastrophic events.